Hello all, I'm John Anderson. I am a farmer, sixth generation, and I'm deeply committed not just to agricultural production. I know I don't look like one tonight. You know, when I'm out there in the farm, they say I can't see you in a suit. When I'm dressed up, they say you're not a farmer. But I really am. Well, I'm a farm labourer now. My son and daughter-in-law run the operation. But I'm deeply committed to agricultural production, to the business of feeding people, to the business of trying to ensure that political systems work well enough to meet the needs of those who are disadvantaged, those who are marginalised, those who go through the horror, and it must be a horror, of wondering how they're going to prevent their children from stunted growth and stunted opportunities. And how good is it that we can come together in the name of the noble pursuit of feeding people and of lifting people out of deprivation into opportunity and into a brighter future. And how incredible to think of the progress we've made. And I said to the young scholars today, we in the West are living at an uncertain time. We're not sure about ourselves and our values and our past. It's all too easy to overlook the incredible progress that's been made. And I often think to myself, if you look at that immediate post-World War II era, regardless of how we might feel about them today and what have you, the Allies presided over the rebuilding of a shattered Europe and the turning of Japan into the ally and friend that we regarded as today, rather than trying to, as they'd done after the First World War, squeeze the German pips until there's nothing left. And as part of that more forward and outward-looking attempt to build a better world has been this tremendous emphasis on agricultural research, on extension, on opening up trade opportunities, on a stable global order. Looking rocky at the moment, I have to say. Whether we like it or not, though, well policed by the Americans. And the progress has been astonishing. It really has. Let's rejoice in the good things that have happened. I'm told, I love this one Australian farmer feeds 700 others. Are there any Americans here? I'd love to hear any updates on it, because I reckon we got them creamed on that one. But some of the other stats are fantastic. One that I love is that for the last 10 years, now being interrupted by thanks to Mr. Putin and some of his activities, various other problems, but for 10 years or so, the world's farmers have produced enough food to feed a global population of 10 billion. Put another way, we now feed every day an additional 5 billion mouths. That is incredible. But we need to be very astute, very aware of the challenges that undoubtedly confront us in an unstable world. So we see now a real lack of commitment, in my view, to agricultural research. That's why it's so fantastic that we have our scholars with us. And as many of them as can commit to and find futures and excitement in agricultural research, the better. And I've been talking amongst them, you mentors will be glad to know, and they've all teamed up with their mentors, and they're all enjoying your company. So far, you mentors, you've been doing pretty well. But we need them to be engaged and excited and looking forward and realising that a sense of vocation about these things can be really valuable. I think it would be an utter tragedy if, in the face of the very real challenges we do face globally, we drop our commitment to and the efforts relating to feeding people when we've made such good progress. And the fact that anyone goes hungry now at the moment, as we know, is because of corruption, failed infrastructure, failed delivery systems, not because there's a lack of food, coupled with, if we're honest, sometimes in the West we waste a little bit too much. Some of you know that I do a video podcast series, and I recently did one with John Cleese. Have you heard that name? Their family name was Cheese, but they changed it by deed poll to Cleese. That's a true story. Anyway, I promised my wife that when we had a meal with John Cleese before we did the recording, that I would not try in any way, shape or form to be witty to one of the world's cleverest men. But I fell into it by accident. He couldn't quite finish his steak, and he apologised profusely and said, this is terrible and we shouldn't waste food. And trying to make light of it, I told him a true story. I said, my wife and I have just been out with a South African and his wife, and they were in Sydney, and they were entertaining good mutual friends from England. And he couldn't finish his steak either, this big South African. And as the waitress took the plate away, he pulled it back down again. And he said, "Excuse me," he said, "as you can see, I've not quite been able to finish my steak. There is still a little piece here. In fact, it's quite a big piece. Could I have a refund on it, please?" And I thought John Cleese was going to split his sides. He said, "Just when I thought I'd heard everything ridiculous, somebody comes up with something like that." And sensing there might be more, he said, "How did the poor girl react?" And I said she was horrified. She looked at him, she said, "I don't see how I can make this work. How do I make that work, sir?" And he said, "Well, it's a perfectly good piece of steak, and someone else will come in wanting a steak, and you can give them this one, and they can pay for it, so I don't pay for it as well." By the time she came back with the bill, and he went through "I've forgotten my wallet, can I do the washing up?" She said, "I'm terribly sorry, sir, I'm in front of you, I've done the washing up, you'll have to pay." The business of food production. We are going to enjoy a great meal tonight, aren't we fortunate? But it's so important that whatever challenges confront us as a global community, environmental, strategic, economic, trade-wise, we'll have a far better chance of handling it properly and with dignity and with effectiveness if we are committed to the well-being and the dignity of everyone, and in particular their children. Enough. Our topic this year is indeed related to the things I've been touching on: global food security in a riskier world, diversification for resilient food and nutrition systems. So welcome to you all, and welcome to those who are joining us online from other parts of Australia and across the globe. Can I acknowledge in the room Neil Andrew, who is a former chair, is now a patron of the Crawford Fund for Agricultural Research. And can I acknowledge Margaret Reid from here in Canberra, a former board member, now also a patron. Oh, you're right there with the other patron. There must be something about a club of patrons in this place. It's terrific to see you. And I know that you would like me to mention the passing of John Kerrin, a remarkable contributor to public life and to agricultural policy in this country. We mourn his passing. Ditto Jim Ingram, so long someone who was integral to agricultural research and indeed to the Crawford Fund, also lost this year, and more recently, very suddenly, the former secretary of my department and someone who became a good personal friend in Mike Taylor. Well, the business of food security doesn't get, as I said, any easier. We can't rest on past successes. We need to continue the research effort. And as I look forward to the next couple of days, I do want to say we have a couple of really great things to celebrate tonight. Firstly, I get to present the Crawford Medal for 2022. Secondly, we'll hear from the very highly respected Dr. Alani Uberjaro. I have trouble with pronunciation of names, including my own, so I hope I've managed it to some extent. But she is the Chief Executive Officer of the Centre for International Forestry Research and the Director General of World Agroforestry. Thirdly, the dinner provides the best opportunity there is for all of you to meet and network with old colleagues and friends, hopefully make new acquaintances, develop a rich matrix, particularly you young people, of connectedness with other people who are doing important areas of work that might overlap with what you're doing now and in the future, and share, we trust, a passion for agriculture in the sense of its role in development and a focus on food and nutrition security. So, on that note, the first item of business, the Crawford Medal, recognises people who have made a considerable and continued contribution to international agricultural research. The 2022 Crawford Medal is this year presented to leading international trade and development economist, Emeritus Professor Kim Anderson, Companion of the Order of Australia. Kim is accompanied by his wife Bronwyn. I was just able to say that I'm married to a Mrs. Anderson as well. You're a little politer, I think, because when I told you, as I said to the students today, that I don't feel any different on the inside, but when I look in a mirror, I said to my wife the other day, oh, darling, you know, look, the hair's silver and everything sort of, the skin doesn't look too good. Everything's sinking south. Quick, I need something to boost my morale, say something positive. She said, well, I have been thinking recently, there's no doubt about it, your eyesight stayed terribly good. Anyway, but Kim's work has been prodigious. It's been varied and long recognised for its quality and its significance in Australia and abroad. In addition to his long association with the University of Adelaide and his lengthy and continuing connection with the ANU here, Kim Anderson has held senior research leadership positions at the World Trade Organisation and the World Bank, and a large number of significant research advisory positions, including in Australia. Some may argue that his research on wine economics requires some mention and perhaps some elaboration. I'm going to disappoint you. I think for tonight and for this award, we should point to Kim's work with the board and as chair of the International Food Policy Research Institute, which I'm pleased to say had Sir John Crawford as its foundational chair. The vision of that institute is a world free of hunger and malnutrition. Its mission is to provide research-based policy solutions that sustainably reduce poverty and end hunger and malnutrition. Kim now chairs the International Centre of Insect Physiology and Ecology, and we'll hear of some of its work tomorrow. But in the meantime, his contributions from trade to wine and insects perhaps tells us something about the range of his work and his interests. He was also Commissioner on the Commission for International Agricultural Research from 2011 to 14, and was President of ACR's International Policy Advisory Council from 2014 to 2020. So it's a genuine honour, Kim, to present this medal and the certificate to you tonight. The wording on the certificate sums it up well. In recognition, it says, of Professor Kim Anderson's immense contribution to the, quote, development of economics in the overlapping fields of international trade and political economy, with a strong focus on agriculture and products of importance to developing economies, and his strong governance and advisory roles with the CGIAR and with ACR. It's terrific to see you both here tonight. Can I ask you, Kim, to come up? And if I've been appropriately guided, I think the material is down here in front of me. Thank you. There you go. Thank you. So how are we going to do this? Because you want a nice photograph. You want that held up? Yes. And you should hold that. Okay. There we go. A few words, yes.
Well, thank you very much, John, for those kind words. Thanks also to the South Australian Committee of the Crawford Fund. Neil is here, Neil Andrew. I don't know who else is here from the committee there, but I'm very thankful for their nomination of me for this award. And it's a great honour when I look at the list of previous recipients of this award. Most have been agricultural scientists, so it's nice to see economics recognised here as well. John didn't mention, I should say, there's no nepotism here. As far as I know, looking back, John's been here 6 generations, I've been here 7 generations, and we can't see any overlap in the trees, so it must have been back in Scotland somewhere that we were part of the same clan. But he probably doesn't know, but my family also had a farm outside of Gunnedah. My father was born on that station back 100 and something years ago, but they were South Australians mostly, but had 2 or 3 generations here in New South Wales. My contribution's really been enormously helped by three groups of people that I'd like to acknowledge at the beginning. One, of course, is my family, and especially my wife. So we've had 50 years together now. So she's managed to keep me grounded over these years. Well, she's tried to. Secondly, to my co-authors, some of whom are in this room, and of course one learns a lot from working with others, and I greatly appreciate the efforts that they've made to work with me and put up with me and make a contribution to this area of economics globally. And thirdly, especially because there's mentees here today, I thought I'd like to mention some of the mentors that helped me through university and beyond. Starting with John Dillon. Many of you older ones would know him. He was lecturer at Adelaide, and then at a very early age, mid-30s, he was attracted to New England and became Professor of Farm Management there. And I went up there as a freshman, arrived on my 17th birthday, and he was allocated, all our first year Ag Econ students were allocated a capital M mentor, and he was mine, and I met with him early on in that first term, and he said, "What have you got this South Australian cadetship for? That's silly, you have to go back and work for the South Australian Department of Agriculture for 3 years. Get rid of that, and then you can go straight to graduate school after you finish." Well, that would have been nice if somebody else had given me a scholarship, but in the absence of that, I went back to South Australia and did work for 3 years, and that's when I met my wife, which was great. And it was also where I learnt to write for non-economists. We had a little quarterly magazine we sent out to farmers, and that gave me an incentive to write a bit better. And we did some book reviews in that to just expose people to new literature, and one of the books I reviewed was Gail Johnson's Disarray in World Agriculture. It came out in 1973. He was at the University of Chicago, and that gave me this sense that you could bring together my interest in agricultural economics and development economics and international trade into one unit and look to fight global poverty with that focus, and simultaneously be doing something for Australian farmers, improving markets out there for farm products. So John Dillon was very much supportive of ACR's work. He ran the Policy Advisory Council for nearly a dozen years, I think, shortly after Sir John Crawford was instrumental in setting up ACR. Then he contributed hugely to the CGIAR. He was on 5 different boards of the International Centres for Agricultural Research and chaired 2 of those, so almost nobody has a record as long as that in the CGIAR. He died quite young, unfortunately, in his latter 60s from skin cancer. He was watching too much cricket. So that time in South Australia was instrumental in me aiming to get to Chicago, and luckily I got there and worked under Gail Johnson and his colleague T.W. Schultz, and dozens of other extraordinary economists in that university. 9 of the folks I came in contact with in that first year had or subsequently got a Nobel Prize in economics, so it was the most concentrated group of Nobel laureates in economics globally. That was wonderful. I loved it intellectually, but Bron hated the southern side of Chicago in those crime-ridden days in 1974-5. So I transferred to Stanford and thoroughly enjoyed a couple of years there, finishing off my PhD with Wally Falcon as my supervisor there. And lots of you here know Wally. He died, unfortunately, just last month, but he was a great contributor to international agricultural research and development as well. He was working initially with Harvard Institute for International Development in South Asia during the Green Revolution, just when Sir John Crawford was similarly contributing. And then he moved to working a lot helping agricultural development in Indonesia, where Sir John Crawford also worked. I'm sure they crossed each other in those times. I'm not sure, I never asked him that, but anyway, he was also a great contributor to the CGIAR. He chaired IRI's board and then CIMMET's board, and as I said, passed away only a month or so ago. So that was a great time, and then I was lucky enough to get a job at ANU and came to what's now called the Arndt Corden Department of Economics. Professor Arndt was probably the top economic development person at that time, and Professor Corden, the top trade policy person, not just here, one of the top trade policy persons globally. And so I had a lucky 6 years here working under those folks, so they were fantastic mentors. But I was in the Coombs building, those of you who know the ANU campus, and my next door neighbour in that building happened to be Sir John Crawford. And so for those years I was at ANU, we had this interaction virtually daily with him there. He was Chancellor at that stage. He'd moved up from being Vice-Chancellor, but he still had this great interest in agricultural development. And of course he also was instrumental in opening up trade between Australia and Japan from the mid-50s. Still took an interest in that, including in the agricultural trade dimension of that. And so he stimulated me to organise a workshop, the first research workshop I'd organised, international one, on newly industrialising Asia and Australian agriculture. And he kindly opened that conference we had at ANU and subsequently wrote the foreword to the book that was the proceedings volume for that setting. So to all of those, I greatly appreciate the job they did for mentoring me, and I'll think of that medal. When I see that medal, I'll think of each of those persons. So thank you very much, John, for handling that.